And no more words. Scott
Gould.
Thank you. Lovely to see all of you. Have you had a nice time at SECR this year?
All right, good. That's
5 of you. The rest of you are lying. Now, did you think about this question? Which engagement is the best? Which kind of engagement is the best? So let's quickly see. We had engagement with a wedding ring. If you liked it, then you should have put a ring on it. We had Facebook, Instagram, Twitter likes. Bing! You want to do a quick ping after 3? 1, 2, 3. Bing! There we go. We had lightsabers. And we also had engaged, as in occupied, possibly like you see in the toilet sometimes. So let's do a quick vote. Who here thinks the best type of engagement is a engagement ring? Put your hands up or shout. All right. There you go. There's always one lady who's like, yep. Are you engaged? Yes. Ah, congratulations. I was about to advertise that you were ready to be engaged, but you already are. All right. Next up, who thinks likes are the best? Ooh, a few people, hands up. Okay. Who thinks being engaged in the toilet is the best? There is always, I've done this talk for 2 years on 5 continents. There is always one man. There's always one man who says, yep, that one. And finally, who thinks Star Wars is the best type of engagement? Yeah, all right, Yulia, you were right. You guessed it right. Of course, Star Wars is the best type of engagement. And why is that? Because this photo represents a sense of people being engaged so deeply by something that they love it. It's the way that this person feels about the sport that they're watching. This type of love, this type of deep engagement is so valuable. Whether it's customers who feel this way about your products and services, whether it's team members who feel this way about your team, about your organization, whether it's communities that feel this way about your mission, whether it's citizens who feel this way about a nation, it is very, very engaging. And that's what's driven, I think, perhaps most remarkably, events like this, where people will queue up for things. I remember queuing up overnight to watch the first Empire, Phantom Menace when it came out, and I got dressed up like a Jedi, and I stayed out all night because I was so excited by Star Wars. The question, of course, though, is how do we get here? How do we get to people being this engaged around what we do? And it's well worth us going on that journey because the statistics say that when people are engaged to that degree, it's hugely beneficial. Gallup did a survey of over 200,000 business units and found that those organizations that optimize for engagement outperform the standard business by a factor of 3.5 times. It's huge. In fact, the most engaging outperformed the standard by a factor of 6 times. Their performance is 6 times better. That's the difference between a market leader and someone who's 2nd, 3rd, 4th place. And in terms of customers particularly and users, which is relevant to us here today, there are some very compelling stats there. People who are engaged spend 3 times more per year. They spend 90% more frequency. They are 4 times more advocating. They're also more likely to try new products. So when you release something new, because they're engaged, they're more likely to try it. That's really, really cool. But again, the question is, how do we get here? Well, actually, it's actually quite simple. And it's rooted in our evolutionary heritage. Has anybody been in a situation like this before, where you are meeting somebody over coffee and you're trying to get the conversation going? Anyone? Oh, okay, a few of you. The rest of you need to get out more. That was a joke and it was funny. Now, that was funny. Now, the way that we engage people over coffee is we begin by scattering different possible things that we could talk about. So you might sit down. Let's call these 2 people Adam and Eve. And Adam here on the left sits down opposite Eve. He finds her very beautiful, and he goes, right, I really want to engage her in conversation. I wonder what she's into. So he starts off by, he's a bit slow. He starts off talking about sport, and perhaps she's not really into sport. She doesn't really respond. So he goes, all right, let me change my line here. He begins talking about Star Wars. She doesn't even like Star Wars. Oh, my word. And then he happens to mention that he likes poetry and he likes Shakespeare. And, oh, she goes crazy. She loves Shakespeare too. They're English, obviously, because everyone in England loves Shakespeare. We're forced to love it at school. And he begins quoting, some poetry. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. And she's really, really excited. And she goes, bing! Yes, I like that. I didn't like the other stuff, but I like that. And actually, likes are where engagement starts. A like is a way of someone saying to you, I like this. In fact, I've been doing it to you here because I asked you some questions, and what did you do? When you saw the photo that you liked, what did I ask you to do? To raise your hand, to show that you like it. So likes are where we start. Now, if she responds and she does something with that, then we go from scattering something to gathering. It's a little bit like farming. When we went from being hunter-gatherers to being settled humans, we began to farm the land. And the way that we did that was we scattered seed, and then if the seeds grew, and you never knew which seed would grow and which seed wouldn't, but when the seeds grew, you would then gather in the harvest. And this is a really important thing, is you never quite know what people are going to respond to. Anybody here run their own business? Hands nice and high so I can see you. All right, a few people. All right, that's a low count. But those of you who did raise your hands, isn't it true that when you're trying to find a new business deal, often the business deal that you think is definitely going to happen often doesn't happen. And the one that you thought would never happen, happens. You ever found that? Yep. Or you found in life that the person that you thought might be a really great friend didn't end up being a really great friend, but the person that you didn't really get on with ends up being a great friend. You just never know. You never know in life what's going to grow and what isn't. And that's the thing. That's the farming life. So she gathers. She begins to respond to him, and he's getting some traction now. And of course, you know this, is that when somebody's really engaged in a conversation, it's a little bit like our friend here, the toilet man. That's your new nickname at work now, the toilet man. Because what happens is when we're really engaged by something, have you noticed how you can't focus on anything else? When you're really engaged? I mean, just to be a bit honest, when you're in the toilet and you lock it and it says engaged, the point is no one else can use it. You are completely focused on it. And it's the same way that when we are engaged in something, we experience something called flow. Flow is this psychological state of immersion. And what happens is nothing else can engage us at that moment. We are hooked in the moment. Now, the moment doesn't last for very long necessarily, but you know those times when you're having a conversation and you are completely locked in? You hearing me? Where you are like, oh, or you're watching a film and you're like, wow. Or you're at a live music event and you're just like, you are in the moment. For me, actually, one of the things that happens with me is when I do website coding as a hobby. I've been doing it for 20 years. And for me, when I do it, time just flies by. I am completely focused on it. So that's really, really good. And for many people, particularly if you're building apps, you think that's the highest level of engagement. For you, the best engagement you could get is that a user is really, really engaged in your app in the moment. But that's not the end. And if you end there, you miss out on the real value. You see, what Adam will do is he will sow some seed, he will gather the seed that grows, and then he will make it matter. Scatter, gather, matter. If we are farming, and we have sown wheat seeds, and we've grown wheat, and I've got a load of wheat in my hands, and I've been really focused on gathering all of that wheat, is that wheat by itself going to be helpful for anyone? No. What do we do to the wheat to make it helpful? Make food, or even better, we make beer. Thank you. The point is that we take what we've gathered, but we turn it into something valuable. We make a lasting resource out of it. Somebody's really engaged in your app, but how does that matter to their life? And it's the apps that matter to us, that allow us to take wheat and turn it into something that is nourishing to our bodies. That's the analogy, that's the trick. And that's when that higher level of an engagement ring happens, is when something matters to you, you become bonded to it. You develop an affection for it. I mean, let's recognize we're talking to a room of developers mostly. those of you here who've worked in development, you'll know that if a programming language or a new product or a new stack or a new tool, if it doesn't really make a tangible difference, it doesn't matter how much fun it is to use, you're not going to be engaged with it for too long. Am I right? It has to make a tangible difference. It has to matter to you. And the programming languages and the tools and the things that don't matter, even though they're fun, will slowly fade away. Now, let's go through actually what it looks like to do each of these three things of scatter, gather, and matter. As you will all know, trying to communicate today is actually pretty tough. This is Times Square. I was there a few years ago with my kids walking down this street. And look at it. It is just everything out there is screaming for your attention, right? All this stuff. Hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. Hey, come here. And all of these things are trying to scatter themselves out to you to get your attention. And it can be hard to cut through it. If anyone here is launching a new product, you know how difficult that is, right, to get in front of prospective users. So there are two things that we need to do if we really want to get our message across. The first is we have to communicate a lot. You have to communicate a whole load. Research has been done into how much we need to communicate. How much do you think we under-communicate? Do you think we under-communicate maybe we don't communicate half, 50%? Hands up. Maybe, okay, we only communicate 25% of what we need to? Hands up. Okay, what about we only communicate 10% of what we need to? Okay, who thinks here that we don't communicate even 1% of what we need to? That's the one. They worked out the number of messages that come into someone's mind every day. And most products, most campaigns, most change initiatives, most ways of us getting any message across are under-communicated to a factor of 100. Like, let that sink in. So we need to communicate a lot to get something across. In fact, one of my favorite sayings is you only know that you're saying something enough when you feel like you're talking about it too much, right? If you've got a team and you want to engage a team in a project, you have to talk about it so much that you think you're talking about it too much for them to only be just hearing about it enough. I see this all the time with my clients. They say that they think that because they've said something once, everybody's heard. Is that true? Hell no. You're going to say it over and over and over and over. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure we communicate a lot. And then the second thing that we need to do if we really want to make something memorable is do what's called schema hacking. Who would like to hack some schemes here today? Thank you. You don't know what it is yet. So now, who here has received one of my glorious stickers? Oh, thank you. If you haven't and you would like a sticker, here they come. This might not work. Oh, that was quite good. Now, on these stickers, oh wow, I'm really getting good at this now. So, oh wow, 5 points for hitting the cameraman. That one not so good. Whoa, that one almost cut your head off. Now, you might have seen, can anybody shout out one of the things that was on one of the stickers? All right, scatter together matter. Okay, not that one.
Perhaps another one?
Why so serious? Now, what's that a line from? Batman and The Dark Knight, right? Where the Joker goes, why so serious? And the point is that with engagement, we're often so serious. But actually, if we want people to be engaged, we should be playful. So I've taken the idea of the Joker and making you remember it. What's another one that's on there? Oh, here's one. Smells like team spirit. I'm clearly stealing the line of that famous Nirvana song. Smells like teen spirit, just making sure you get it, that you do have Nirvana here, thank God. And the point is, when somebody creates something new, they take an existing idea and they put a twist on it. That is called schema hacking. Schema is your mental view of the world. It's the way that you see things. So part of your schema will be, I know there is a song called Smells Like Teen Spirit. And that song is kind of vibrant, and it's upbeat, and it's powerful. So if I want you to remember me and one of my ideas, I could either create something that you've never heard of and hope that you remember it, or I could create something that sounds a little bit like something you already know, and therefore are more likely, I have more chance that you are going to be, that you will remember it. You get what I'm talking about? So that's schema hacking. We see this all the time. In fact, the whole of UX is built on the idea of schema hacking. It's taking ideas and then turning them into something that people already know. That's where the concept of skeuomorphism came from, where things were designed to look like everyday objects, right? So we called them notebooks because it was meant to be like a notebook. So we're trying to make something rememberable by building on your thing. It's why we have buttons, because we're used to having buttons on analog things. So now we have buttons digitally because it moves across. Of course, Apple went too far. Remember when their old Notes app used to look like an actual notepad and all their different things? But that's where that comes from. So if you want ideas to be memorable, you need to, first of all, communicate a whole load, and second of all, make it memorable by hacking someone's schema. If you've got a vision at work, phrase it in something that people know about. It could be even as basic as, we're like MailChimp, but we do this. We're like PHP, but we do this. We're like Strava, but we do this, at the very basic level. At a higher level, take clever, fun ideas and just twist them and make them your own. Here's an example from my city. There's a guy who fixes locks. He's a locksmith. And he's called his business Sir Fix-a-Lock, which is a riff off of the English knight Sir Lancelot. There was an English knight called Sir Lancelot. He calls himself Sir Fix-a-Lock, and he drives around and everything. And then at Christmas, he puts a little Christmas hat. And then when he goes to networking events, guess what he dresses up as? If only he had a lightsaber. Now, he has 90% of the locksmith business in the city. And do you know why? Because that is far easier to remember than Freddie's locksmith business. It's fun, it's memorable, right? So why don't we do more of this? Now, the second thing we talked about is gathering, right? How do we bring people together? How do we do something that gets them to be completely immersed and focused in the moment, like Toilet Guy over here? Well, there are two key words that we need to use. The first, we need to make things sensorial, as in they need to engage the senses. And unfortunately, historically, technology has actually not been very good at engaging our senses. And, we've had this idea that somehow technology should be emotionless, perhaps, and that it shouldn't really be playful or fun. The trouble with that is that we don't actually get engaged by things that are bland. We get engaged by things that have a sense of motion and that touch us. There's a very simple reason for this. When something physically arouses our body, our mind, due to its evolutionary heritage, says, okay, something is happening now that I need to pay attention to. And it begins to transmit more dopamine into the brain and more adrenaline. And that helps you remember things better. So quite simply, we remember memorable moments because they are experiential. For instance, how many of you here can remember a powerful moment in your life where you were sat in front of a laptop? Not many. Because a laptop it actually struggles to engage us physically that much at all. But when we're using technology in a physical way to help us, then we're more likely to remember it. We'll look at some examples of that in a second. The second thing that helps us gather people, create these immersive moments, is when things are social. Quite literally, we are social beings. We have the ability to hold on to hundreds of connections at once. And when we are around other people, something very magical happens, and that is a chemical in our brain is released called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love hormone. It's the hormone that makes you bond with children or with friends. Right now, if you are in any way feeling kind of smiley or positive, that's oxytocin kicking off in your brain. And the more people that are in the room, guess what you're going to have more of in your brain? The oxytocin. Really, really simple. But oxytocin then, again, opens up those pathways for you to remember things. So here's a great example of somebody that is using something very sensorial. Who can guess what he's doing? Sorry? I don't think he's going to swim with his clothes on. No. I mean, he maybe, I don't know, but I don't think so. Is he doing a selfie? He could be. Trying to catch his new iPhone because he threw it and then trying to catch it at the same time. Okay, nope. Trying to demonstrate his courage.
Doing this. I mean, right. Any other ideas?
Trying to save somebody? No. It's not Photoshop, no. It's a photo illusion, there's glass. I'll tell you what he's doing. He's trying to catch Pokemon. Seriously. Pokemon was an amazing thing because it used technology for us to have physical experiences. And so it became inherently more memorable. Think about the fastest growing social network right now. Instagram is booming because it's so photo-focused. We use it to capture things that are actually happening and then twist them to what we need. It is a very sensorial app. When you open Instagram and the stories are at the top, little motions tick off. When you slide it, it's got some nice animations. You're able to put features into the stories to make them dynamic. All of these things are ways of making it more sensorial to us. And that's why CSS animations are actually such a critical thing. The reason, quite simply, is because when we as humans see something that's moving and has some sense of autonomy, it engages us because our brains think it's alive. They did, some famous researchers called Clifford and Nass at Stanford did this test. They got a laptop. They had someone who had their laptop, and the person sat down, and the laptop was quite old. It was breaking. It wasn't working very fast. So they talked to the man about his laptop. And he couldn't really be very nasty about his laptop. He didn't really complain about it. They took the laptop away and put it in a different room and asked him the same questions about whether he liked his laptop or not. He now spoke far more negatively about his laptop because it wasn't in the same room as him. They repeated the test over and over, and they found out we treat electronic products as if they're people. It doesn't make sense, and you don't think you do it, but you do. And so they actually wrote a book called The Man Who Lied to His Laptop. And that's what we do. We imbue these things with a sense of life because of our evolutionary heritage. Finally, the third thing that we do is we matter, right? Now, this is, I think, the most important thing, is we've talked about, let's say, user experience and how you can engage things in a user experience. Well, that's very good. But actually, the gold is what you do with that experience. Take all of us right now. If I'm just entertaining, I could be really crazy dancing around, and that would be very fun, but you'd go away and you wouldn't remember anything. My goal is to try and give you something that's meaningful that you can go on and use like wheat to make bread or beer with. Now, there are two things that you must do if you want to matter. The first is you must give people physical means to achieve something new in their life. But the deeper thing is you must give people psychological meaning. You see, these people are queuing up for this Apple launch day, not just because the product gives them something new to do, it gives them new means to achieve something. They're there because it means something to them. It's meaningful to them. And again, in technology, we tend to shy away from this, but actually we're missing out on the gold. Here's the case study. Here we have an iPhone and a Samsung. And the feature sets of these phones are pretty much identical, aren't they? Pretty much. Who here, out of interest, has an Apple phone, an iPhone? Who here has an Android phone? Oh, you poor people. It's just an easy joke. It's an easy joke. Don't worry. I'm not discriminating against Android users. You just have bad design taste. That's all. Joke, joke, joke. In fact, do you know who makes the screens for the iPhone? Samsung. The two products are almost the same. So then, well, let's see, how do they compete at a service level? Well, actually, if you've got Apple Pay, you've got Android Pay. If you've got Apple Music, you've got Spotify. If you've got iTunes, you've got Google Play and everything. So their ecosystem of services is practically the same as well. Okay, well, maybe they compete on the experience side of things. Well, actually, both of them have got pretty cool stores. On the left, we have a picture of an Apple store, and on the right, we have Samsung's copy of an Apple store. Thank you. Appreciate that laugh. It was another dig at Samsung users, basically, in case you didn't get it. The difference, it turns out, is who would you actually rather have tattooed on you? It turns out that that's what really is going on, is the people here who use iPhones, there might be one or two who don't, and people who use Samsungs might be one or two who don't, but by and large, the reason why we use one or the other is actually less to do with the feature set and more to do with which one we identify with. Do you want to have an Apple tattooed on you, or would you like to have an Android tattooed on you? It's an interesting question. In fact, the question of tattoos is quite fascinating because I couldn't find anybody that's got Samsung tattooed on them online. You cannot find Samsung tattoos apart from this young girl that's got a Hello Kitty Samsung Galaxy tattoo. The reason why, I think, is because basically nobody wants a microwave brand tattooed on their body. Although some people are willing to take their Samsung phone and stick an Apple sticker on it to try and create some sense of meaning. It goes even further. This is a guy who had a pair of Nike Air Jordans tattooed onto his foot. Interestingly, Nike Air Jordans are a really bad basketball shoe. They're not a very good shoe altogether, but the meaning in the brand, the sense of psychological meaning, the identity is very, very potent. There's also a gym that gives people free membership if they get the gym logo tattooed on them. The slight mistake they made is that their logo looks a little bit like a swastika. So they might have maybe thought of that before they did that. So scatter, gather, matter. Now here's basically the deep thing, is that the way that we engage with everything is the way that we engage with people. And the way that we engage with people is the way that we engage with everything. If you want to engage users, if you want to engage team members, if you want to engage a community, if you want to engage customers, you must do three things, which is what we are doing all the time. Is first of all, you scatter a message to see what people respond to. When they respond, you create a powerful, immersive moment. And then at the end, you matter by making sure that connection was meaningful in some way. It's actually what I've done with you today, if you think about it. I've scattered out lots of different examples. I've got you to raise your hands to try and respond and gather responses. But ultimately, I'm trying to matter to you by giving you an idea that you can use again and again. And that's the way that we engage anybody, anywhere, at any time. It's the way that we engage with ideas. It's the way that we engage with Star Wars. It's the way that we engage with likes. It's the way that we engage with our romantic partners. That's how all of it goes. And if you would like to be able to assess how engaging you are, there is a free assessment that you can do that I have available at engagementassessment.me, and it will score you on how well you scatter, how well you gather, how well you matter, and then it will provide a personalized recommendation of what you should do next to get more engagement. And at this point, I will move out of the way so you can take a handy photo. That's me. Thank you very much for engaging with me today and for having me in Russia. And I will see those of you who are at my workshop tomorrow bright and early. Otherwise, have a lovely evening and safe travels. Bye.
Maybe a couple of questions.
Oh, yes. And I'm back. All right. Can't get rid of me.
Excuse me, I'm just curious. Do you taking this chair on any conference you are going to? This one, is it yours?
No, I got that from out there.
Ah, okay.
But
Because it suits you. Just.
Oh, thank you. Well, I put it there because when I was talking about creating those sensorial moments, I wanted to create that exclusive focus feeling to show you that's the way that we work. So it was like a little trick.
You get it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Never been asked that before.
Thank you very much. Can you tell us why Star Wars matters? Because I understand that Star Wars is really engaging.
Yes.
But why does it matter? What it creates for us?
Franchises like Star Wars, Harry Potter, Marvel, they, first of all, matter to us by providing, well, they provide all the levels of engagement. So scattering, they're superb at communicating the idea. When you see their advertising, it gets you. They create powerful experiences when you watch their films or when you go to their theme parks, right? They're really immersive. But they matter because they create worldviews that we adopt. Anybody here who, okay, so who here likes Star Wars? Raise your hand up. How many of you here have spent time, keep them up for a second. How many of you have spent time reading Wikipedia pages with a little bit more detail about a character or something like that? So still quite a few people. And I imagine if you did the same thing with Marvel or Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, these things are engaging because they offer us a world to explore and begin to derive meaning from. They give us models. How many here, I'm definitely one of them, have tried to think of themselves as a Jedi at various times in their life? Thank you, thank you. How many have been inspired by a character from a Marvel film or a character from Lord of the Rings, or considered naming a child after one of your favorite characters, right? That's what we do. When people name their children after a character in literature or someone after a song, it's because those things, they provide meaning. You ever had that time where a song was so meaningful for you that when you were down, you'd play that song?
Yeah.
And you'd cry while you listened to it? Maybe not you. Toilet guy, maybe. Definitely me. I've got songs that when I play them, they move me. They give me strength. You ever go on YouTube and there's a scene in a film that you've watched a dozen times and you can quote? Right? They provide us with deep psychological meaning. They are basically the modern day religion. In many senses, they provide us what religion has historically provided, stories that give us meaning. They give us warmth. They give us courage and strength. Was that a good answer?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any cultural difference how to engage people from different cultures?
Yeah, yes. In terms of... Yeah, there we go. Thank you and good night.
What is the difference?
Well,
Maybe some common patterns for Western culture and Eastern.
yeah, so all of us are working off of the same human operating system, our human OS, which has this rich evolutionary heritage, where anything that's moving we deem to have life, and we want to engage with it. By and large, people are actually designed to respond, not initiate. So if you want people to engage, you have to ask, but that's a different, we'll look at that tomorrow. Culture is then a wrapper around that. It determines how that is done. Okay, so here, I imagine that some of the jokes that I've made, some of the references might not make sense, just because culturally they're not known. That would be a factor. Different cultures express themselves in different ways. So you have Eastern cultures tend to be, more highly polite, although their TV shows are then crazy. So they have the same breadth of emotions as us. They just display them in different ways, right? I'm English, so I'm disposed to be very, very polite. And yet you also see these English people that are lager louts and go drinking and are hooligans, right? So again, it's the same breadth. The point of this framework is if you go to a culture, you can quickly work out how that culture works by scattering a few possibilities and seeing how people gather. I remember the first time I traveled to a Muslim country. I went to Pakistan, and there was a woman with a hijab, and I put my hand out to greet her, and she didn't shake my hand. And I learned that actually the way that you greet a hijabi is you do this, right? So I scattered my hand. She didn't gather to that. That didn't work. That seed did not work. So I changed my tactic and made that the new seed, and that did work. So I learned. So you can also use the model to understand people, right? So if you and I were to sit down for 5 minutes, this is just how conversation works. You can't get away from it. Is I would throw out a number of different things to see what you respond to find common ground that we can then connect and hopefully build a bond that matters to both of us, which then we can go back to and continue building our relationship.
Do you think, does emoji get us universal language how to engage people?
Emoji.
Emoji.
Emoji, again, do have some cultural differences, but they're very good because they're able to convey something based off of our evolution and the fact that a smile is a smile anywhere. There are some things that are universal languages. Food is a universal language. Sport is a universal language. Music is a universal language. Kindness is a universal language. Art is a universal language. And emojis seem to be taking language that is not universal and endeavoring to make it universal. So I think it's a very good thing. And that's why when people use it, it's really engaging. If you use emoji in an email subject line, people are more likely to open it up because it not only is it more engaging, it's also different. And that also gets us engaged.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
First of all, thank you. My short question will be about engagement and motivation. What do you think of it?
The difference between engagement and motivation.
Yes.
Motivation is when, if we talk about intrinsic motivation, that's when I want to do something. Intrinsic motivation only happens when somebody is very highly engaged because they have a sense of love or affinity or connection with something. Low levels of engagement are really about external motivation, trying to prompt somebody. They're very similar concepts. However, if we think about love, which is the height of engagement, or flow, which would be at that middle level, neither of those necessarily have to be about motivation. I can love somebody, but not be motivated to do anything about it right now because I'm here or whatever, right? So engagement is stronger. Motivation is more about a feeling in a moment that spurs us to do something, whereas engagement actually goes deeper beyond making us do or not do, which is ostensibly what motivation is about, whether we do or don't do something.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thanks for this very emotional and, of course, outstanding talk.
Thank you.
Applause, please.
Thank you.